世界政府ってのは神かなんかですかい。わしの決定には従っていただきやす。
What's up everyone, I'm the one and only Zage, and since I've started to explain the strengths of characters in One Piece that I think are underrated by the community, I'll continue to do so, with this being about the blind Admiral Fujitora. A lot of the discourse I see around Fujitora shows a lack of understanding of his character and who he is, let alone his strength. But before we delve into it though, if you're new to the channel or you just haven't subbed yet, consider subscribing to the channel and smashing the like button if you like content like this. Your support, as always, is much appreciated. Fujitora is a marine that holds the rank of Admiral, which is the second highest rank in the Navy, and the three admirals are the greatest fighting power of the world government. This means Fujitora is stronger than everyone that ranks below him, including Old Garp and Sengoku, including those in every world government faction like Cypherpole. In Garp and Sengoku's prime, they were a match for the strongest pirates on the sea, the likes of Whitebeard, Roger and Shiki. Whitebeard in his old age was still considered by the world to be the strongest man. This is at least true when he's hooked up to the medical equipment, as that's what allowed his condition to be stabilized, and he started to decline after taking them off. When Shanks met Whitebeard, he pretty much admitted that Whitebeard was at the top when explaining Blackbeard's ambition of trying to reach the top of the world. Shanks said that he's even trying to take Whitebeard's position, which implies that he personally considers Whitebeard to still be at the top of the world, which was Blackbeard's goal. This is consistent as Whitebeard is known as the King of the Seas, the closest to One Piece, and his death allowed for the Throne Wars to begin. Garp and Sengoku probably had a similar decline in strength as Whitebeard due to old age, when Whitebeard is hooked up to the medical equipment and his condition is being stabilized, which would make them comparable in strength. Since Fujitora is a stronger fighting force than Old Garp and Sengoku, he'd be at least a little stronger than that level, which should go to show the ballpark of strength that Fujitora is on. There's also this weird perception of Fujitora that since he's a new admiral, he isn't on the caliber of the former low-gear admirals. This is objectively wrong, as the Navy under Akainu's leadership became the strongest it's ever been. Stronger than the days of Prime Garp and Sengoku, and stronger than when Sengoku was at the helm with Akainu, Kizaru and Aokiji. The admirals make up the majority of the Navy's power, and by replacing Aokiji, who is a little weaker than the strongest current marine Akainu, and Sengoku with Fujitora and Green Bull, it helped the Navy reach its greatest heights. Fujitora has the power of the Zushi Zushi no Mi, which allows him to control gravity, not just vertically but horizontally too. He uses his sword as a conduit to control gravity, allowing him to do things like fly around on a rock. Some of his gravitational feats consist of casually sending down meteors from space, which has been calced at least country level, which isn't even that impressive in One Piece, as you have characters like Donsai, who after awakening his Drow Dragon Nail can now replicate Don Chinchao's ice continent splitting feat. This shows at least country level attack potency, and Donsai isn't even as strong as Gear 2nd Luffy from Dressrosa, let alone Fujitora, who is a top tier in this series, and they are utter trash in comparison. And lifting up all the rubble of Dressrosa, which includes half of Pika's mountain-sized golem. Fujitora collects the rubble to form a massive meteor, which was a threat to the entire Straw Hat fleet and Law's crew, which consists of over 5,000 personnel. One of his gravity attacks is called Raging Tiger, which has the power to destroy a mountain-sized rock formation that surrounds Dressrosa. All this is just Fujitora casually flexing his power and isn't a representation of even a small fraction of his full power. With all that said though, why is it that Fujitora has been underrated for this long? I'll be tackling common takes and arguments you might have heard that have been used in an attempt to downplay Fujitora and put it into its proper context. So let's start off with Doflamingo and the events of the Dressrosa arc. Doflamingo has been used as a way to try to downplay the admirals in general ever since Aokiji saved Smoker. The first dumb take is that Doflamingo perceives the Yonko as a bigger threat than the admirals. For some context, Law had captured Caesar, and if Dofi wanted him back, Law wanted Dofi to resign from being a warlord. Dofi had no choice but to accept the deal, because if Caesar couldn't continue to make smile fruits, then Kaido would kill him. Dofi's fear is shown by his reaction to hearing Law mention that, where we can see Doffy sweating with an uneasy expression. However, Doflamingo faces another problem, because if he resigns from being a warlord, then he becomes a target to the admirals. The common dumb argument is that Doffy felt more threatened by Kaido coming after him than the admirals due to their facial expressions and reactions in this moment. The reason why this is really dumb is because the reactions for both are pretty much the exact same. Doflamingo looks uneasy and sweating a lot in both instances. At the end, when Law ended the call, Doflamingo is very angry and is sweating because he was forced to leave the warlords and became a target to the admirals. I really can't understand how this was ever used as an argument, but it somehow became a very common lie for years. The next dumb argument against Fujitora is during his private negotiations with Doflamingo. The argument surrounding this is that Doflamingo didn't fear Fujitora at all and allegedly had an equal clash, which means Fujitora is closer to that of Yonko commanders than Yonko. Representing this scene like that is a straight up lie, so here's to put it in its proper context. Fujitora's official job in Dressrosa was to prevent the collateral damage on the civilians that would be caused by Luffy and Law trying to take out Doflamingo. He openly admitted that until they were dealt with, Doflamingo was free to do whatever he liked, and Fujitora would turn a blind eye to whatever he was doing. However, after Law and Luffy are dealt with, it'd be Doflamingo who becomes Fujitora's next target by enacting his plan to destroy the warlord system. The only reason Doflamingo is arrogant enough to not feel threatened and attack Fujitora is because at that time, they are technically on the same side. Fujitora is attacked by Doflamingo while he's mid-speech and blocks his kick with ease. I don't know how some try to spin this into an equal clash of offensive attacks when it's very clear Doflamingo was the aggressor and Fujitora defended himself with no difficulty. We see a similar situation when the former Admiral Kuzan saves Smoker. Doflamingo is so arrogant that he doesn't listen to Aokiji and tries to kill Smoker anyway, so Aokiji instantly freezes him before he touches Smoker. Aokiji even holds back on Doflamingo as he didn't freeze him to the bone, which he easily could have like he did to Jozu in Marineford. So the idea that Doflamingo is in any way a challenge for admirals is completely asinine, especially considering Doflamingo was overwhelmed by Gear 4 Luffy and Dressrosa, and a stronger Luffy got to one-shot by base Kaido, who is weaker than Fujitora and the rest of the admirals anyway. The next dumb argument against Fujitora is how Sabo was able to hold his own and fight him evenly. This take shows a lack of understanding of Fujitora's character and his intentions in Dressrosa. Sabo stepped in to fight Fujitora in order to protect Luffy, because from his perspective, Fujitora was trying to stop Luffy from getting to Doflamingo or just trying to capture Luffy in general. However, it was all a ploy, because secretly he wanted Luffy to free Dressrosa from Doflamingo's tyranny, something that the world government had enabled all this time. So now that Sabo has stepped in, Fujitora completely manipulated their fight to make it seem as though Sabo was completely holding him off from reaching Luffy. Even Sabo implies that he realized Fujitora was holding back against him and questioned what he was plotting. The reality is Fujitora suppressed himself to Sabo's level so that he could make their fight an excuse as to why he couldn't go after Luffy, which Sabo ultimately understood to be the case. Even while fighting heavily suppressed, Fujitora is portrayed to be actually winning in their fight, as Sabo is seen damaged a little whilst Fujitora isn't damaged at all. When Vice Admiral Maynard heard about Fujitora's fight with Sabo ending in a draw, he thought it to be ridiculous because Fujitora is an admiral. This adds up with the admiral's portrayal that they are expected to never be bested by enemy subordinates. Due to this, Maynard thought something fishy was going on, and his suspicions are, as we know, were correct. The last argument I'll be addressing that's used to downplay Fujitora would be his fight against Luffy. This one is very pathetic, especially considering this was the one fight made abundantly clear given Fujitora's past actions that he wasn't trying against Luffy at all and in fact let him escape. When fighting Luffy, Fujitora didn't harden his sword at all, and even when the final dice roll didn't land on a 1, which would have meant that he'd let Luffy go without interference, he played it off to the Marines that he was trying to capture the alliance. This was made very clear when all the rubble started to fall and every piece of rubble missed the Law and Luffy alliance. All this is to say that downplaying Fujitora's strength on whatever he did in Dressrosa shows a lack of understanding of his character. Fujitora turned a blind eye to the injustices of the world government for enabling the corrupt warlord system. He didn't believe it to be right as an admiral who serves the world government to fight against the injustices of a warlord that the world government allowed to run wild. Fujitora allowed Doflamingo to do as he pleased, bet on Luffy to defeat Doflamingo, and allowed Luffy to escape. When proper context is applied to his actions, it's very easy to understand why none of these moments are a representation of Fujitora's true power. Finally, we can move away from Dressrosa as we have the Reverie, and during this event the Revolutionary Army snuck into Marijoa not only to declare war against the Celestial Dragons but to save their comrade Kuma. During their rescue attempt, Sabo alongside 3 of the revolutionary captains, Karasu, Morley and Limburg, fought against both Greenbull and Fujitora. The 3 revolutionary captains are likely weaker than Ivankov as well, as they are captains controlling the Blue Seas, whereas Ivankov controls the Grand Line, which is the most dangerous waters. Against 2 admirals, the 4 revolutionaries are definitely outmatched, however their fight being in Marijoa makes this more nuanced. Just like the admirals not wanting to destroy their own base when fighting against the Whitebeard pirates, Fujitora and Greenbull have to suppress their power in order to avoid destroying the most important place in the world in the eyes of the government. So things like Fujitora sending down meteors or using Raging Tiger that could destroy a mountain-sized area probably never happened. As of this recording, chapter 1053 is the latest chapter and One Piece is on a 4-week break. In that chapter we see the difference between heavily suppressed admirals that have to be wary of not destroying their base and when an admiral can fight more loosely. Greenbull destroyed both king and queen including their officers with what appears to be not much difficulty at all, as Greenbull isn't even damaged after this little clash that they had. Although it's true that King and Queen weren't at their best due to King's sword and Queen's mecha arm being broken, it's portrayed as though against an admiral the outcome would be the same regardless of their condition. The same King and Queen who both fought and pressured Marco until he ran out of stamina, and it was portrayed as though Marco could not defeat the 2 in tandem. He could stall them for a little bit but he could not beat them, they would lose to King and Queen in tandem. That same Marco who in Marineford was fighting evenly against heavily suppressed admirals. All this is to say that although Sabo didn't have quite the team to be fighting against 2 admirals, both admirals must have been heavily suppressed due to fighting in Marijoa. The reason for this would be the same reason the admirals were suppressed in Marineford. They don't want to destroy their base. With Marijoa, it's even more important than Marineford in the eyes of the government, as it is the home of the Celestial Dragons and it's the Marines' job to protect the Celestial Dragons. So yeah, they must have been heavily suppressed if they're fighting in Marijoa. So if anything, Fujitora and Greenbull were even more suppressed against the revolutionaries than the Logi admirals were against the Whitebeard pirates. Sabo in the Reverie is also stronger than when he fought Fujitora in Dressrosa, as he had time to train with his fruit. The outcome of this battle is implied to have ended with the Admiral's victory, and Sabo is in some sort of predicament we don't really know. Due to this battle, Fujitora is injured and is shown bandaged up the next day. This is an impressive feat for Sabo, as with minimal help he was able to injure an admiral who's fighting alongside another admiral, albeit they are both heavily suppressed. But he did do more against them than any Whitebeard pirate did against the admirals during Marineford, so that is something that you can nod to Sabo. It also shows that Sabo has made major strides in getting stronger with his newly acquired Devil Fruit. With that said though, it's still against 2 heavily suppressed admirals, and given minor injuries to a top tier, especially when you are someone as strong as Sabo, isn't that big of a deal. And we have seen a top tier like Kaido, for example, being hurt by those much weaker than him, and Fujitora doesn't have the natural durability that Kaido as an Oni would have, as Fujitora is only human. As of this recording, in the latest chapter of One Piece, Greenbull plans to crash the Wano Alliance's party and is confident he can kill Luffy, who he knows defeated Kaido. Kaido before his defeat was also known and considered by some to be the strongest pirate alive. Greenbull is an admiral who came through the same world military draft as Fujitora, and they are both deemed as monsters. Whatever Greenbull does in these coming chapters, depending on its context of course, can add to Fujitora's betrayal as well, so make sure to keep an eye out for what Greenbull does. Well, that pretty much wraps up everything there is to know about Fujitora as of this recording. I know most of this was just explaining why he was heavily suppressed in all his fights, but it really and truly had to be done as he's become underrated due to a misunderstanding of the context of the fights that he's been in, so hopefully this cleared things up. Hopefully we'll be able to see Fujitora let loose and show his full power, but until then, this is all we've got. If you would like to know more about the strength of the Admirals in general, I do have a video on that subject that you can check out. If you enjoyed, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, that would be much appreciated. I've been the one and only Sage, and until next time.